start. Suraj, are we ready to start? We're rolling. We are live streaming as well. Good evening, everyone. My name is Roger Hamilton. We are here for a very special Startup Grind. We are also live casting this as well, so welcome to everyone who's watching from around the world. This is all part of a large entrepreneurs network around the world called Startup Grind, where in all different cities there are monthly events that take place. This is the one in Bali, and this is also supported by Google for Entrepreneurs. So there is a real focus wherever everyone is around the world when they're actually getting together to share that we are actually using technology as much as possible. We're getting this out so that others can actually watch this again in the future as well. And so this is going to be a super special one. And because we're here in Bali, we always are focusing at change makers, entrepreneurs who are here in Bali. And the person that we have tonight is someone really doing some incredible things in education. He's the director of the Green School. You're going to be hearing more about him and his background when he comes up, because we're going to be having a bit of a conversation. But if you could put your hands together and make him very welcome to John Stewart. Can you give him a big round of applause, please? Nothing won't stop this, 'cause we gon' own this club tonight. DJ's gonna drop this. With your foot.
I think if it's in Bali, if you're riding a motorbike, a dog will run out in front of you at some stage. And that happens, and then I fell off my motorbike, and it's been 8 weeks.
You know what's happening? Everyone's thinking, what about the dog? How's the dog?
Let's just say the dog got hit by 2 motorbikes.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, I was the second motorbike.
Wow,
so,
okay.
The dog did not survive.
Right, okay. Well, on that bright note,
Every dog has his day.
on that bright note, you know, this is a really interesting evening and weekend we have, because we have many entrepreneurs that have actually come around the world. So the vast majority of people who are here have actually there's something really interesting about the Green School as a school, is that many of the parents who are there also have traveled in for the education for their children as well. So what I'd love to start with is, you know, what is it, that part in education which makes people want to actually travel to get there? What is it that is the part which you got involved in as to the reason that you became an educator?
I think this is an interesting one, because education has been around. It was really created for the Industrial Revolution. And in education, for me, to get into education, I found there's a different way of approaching it. I think education needs to be progressive and look to the future, and not be looking behind it. And I love schools that are progressive. I love schools that are actually trying to offer a diversity in learning, because it's only through diversity that we actually all build and all gain. So for me, I came to...
Is it working? Are we on? Can you all hear John? Yeah? John's good?
So for me, I came to Green School because I believe in holistic education. I believe education right now is becoming limited. It's having a very narrow focus because it's testable. And we can test our standards because internationally we've introduced these PISAs, which are international tests. And as a result, then nations are doing their tests. And so then schools are doing their tests. And so we've become this very narrow, focused educational institution. And as a result, we're seeing more and more children switch off, disengage, and not be interested in the most important thing in life, which is listening to my voice get very loud, which is learning. And so for me, the focus is, how do you make learning fun? How do you make it engaging? How do you make it real? And what are we doing keeping kids in little boxes and not letting them get out and explore the real world? So that's partly it. And Green School is it because it doesn't have walls.
Right. Actually, I think we've got I think we're working out the... do you have audio issues? Do you want to sort anything out before we continue? Or we good, guys? Say again? Oh, okay. We're good now? Yeah. Awesome.
We can go.
All right, then, could we switch the slide so we can get a picture of what Green School looks like? And as a parent there for quite a number of years and being involved in the school as well, you know, I mean, obviously, I was really attracted to the whole idea of an environmental education, of like the mission and shift that it can have. But at the end of the day, it's like, before we get into solutions or even like possible solutions, when you first became or decided to become an educator, well, first of all, when was that? And did you already at that point have a sense that you wanted to be involved in something new and different, or did that kind of evolve over time once you started seeing the system from the inside and actually, you know, having experience after experience of being a teacher and then actually running schools?
Yeah, this goes back, I think, well, I believe teachers are known and from inside them. I was in grade 3, and when it was in grade 3, I had Mr. Matt, and we were a demonstration school, so we had teachers coming in to learn how to teach by teaching us, and Mr. Matt told my father that I should be a teacher. So as to whether that was the pointer, I don't know, but I loved school. I engaged with school. I wasn't necessarily the best student, but I enjoyed school. And then as I went through school, I found there were certain things that just frustrated me, listening to lesson content that was dictated or written on a board and you had to copy it in, listening to teachers who wanted to control the learning process. And when I was leaving my high school, I wanted to give something back to education, so my focus was to become a teacher. I didn't want to be anything else. I wanted to be a teacher. It wasn't just the holidays. It was actually, it was a focus on delivering something where we could make a difference to the future. And so then I went through my college, and then I traveled the world, and then strangely, luck always plays a part in anybody's future and fate and destiny, whatever you want to call it, but my wife or my girlfriend at the time kicked me. My wife or girlfriend at the time kicked me out of the car in front of a strange school in London. And they said, they employ Australians, go get a job. And my wife and her mother-in-law were both in the car, so I had to leave the car, and I had to walk into a building in the centre of London, which was called Hill House. I had no idea what was in this building. It was just a strange building, red brick, that went up and up and up. And so as I walked in, I'm coming up these stairways, and the stairway was a wooden stairway, and every level there was Swiss Air certification for the Colonel. It was like 5,000 air miles. It was like 15,000 air miles. It was like 30,000 air miles. And you're going up going, wow. And he had this great thing that he was the most traveled person in Swiss Air. And then I got to the top of these stairs, and that's where the office was, and there was this little old lady sitting there, and I said, in my Australian accent, I said, oh, hi, do you do casual teaching? And she said, no, we don't do casual teaching, and she's trying to get rid of me because I was an Australian straight off the street. And so the first point is you have to be brave enough to go in. The second point, you have to have tenacity and persistence. So I said, well, do you know anywhere that does? And all of a sudden at this stage, the daughter-in-law of the Colonel had come out, and they looked at each other and they thought they'll sell this guy to the competitors across the road who aren't very good, Sussex House. So they said, yes, Sussex House. So I'm looking at saying, well, how do you spell that? Third, make sure you postpone the inevitable. So they started to spell Sussex House, and as I did this door opened behind my shoulder, and this really old man stood there like this. And he came out and he's listening to me and he said, what's he here for? And the daughter-in-law saying, don't worry, Colonel, we're just moving him on. And he looked at me and he said, do you play games? And I looked at him and I went, yes. And he said, come into my office. So I walked into the Colonel's office, he sat me down. He had a fold-down bed on the side, but I didn't know that. He sat me down and he said, right. He looked at my CV. He said, we need a games teacher. He said, be back here at 3 o'clock on the dot. Go down and see these other people and I'll let you know if we're going to employ you. And that was it. And all of a sudden, I came back running up Sloane Street at 3 o'clock, got there, made sure I was on the time for the Colonel, and you're never, on time is late, you have to be early. And the Colonel employed me on the spot. And so then I was a games teacher. And it was then that I found out it was very cold in Hyde Park over winter. And I didn't like being in the cold. And one of my friends, who was a New Zealander, was leaving his history position to go back to New Zealand. So I went to the head of school and I said, listen, I'm a qualified teacher. I'd like to be inside and actually educating children. And I hear there's a history position. And she looked at me and she said, I'd be most concerned about an Australian teaching history. She said, would you teach English? And I said, confidence, yes. And I was qualified as an English teacher, primary school teacher, and so then I started teaching English. And then I was promoted very quickly, and then I realized I needed to do my master's. You couldn't be taken seriously, an Australian teaching English in England without a master's, and you have to look for the best. So I was either going to go to Oxford University or Cambridge. I applied, first of all, for jobs in Oxford, and I was so nervous I couldn't sign the check at the end, you know, the receipt for monies, travelling. So I just said, no, it's okay, I'll do it for nothing. And so then I actually went to Cambridge, and I was employed at St John's College School as the head of English. And from there I became the director of studies, and then I was doing my Masters of Education, and in the process I was developing my own textbook, multimedia website, created my own company, Harmony Interactive, sold the textbook, website, interactive program to Nelson Thorne, and then had three babies, one in the tum, and went back to Australia. That's a snapshot.
All right. So, okay. So, like, just from that story, clearly, there's that whole, a little bit of an accident, a little bit of luck, a little bit of the entrepreneurial spirit of, like, let's just give it a go and go through. But all the way through, you were really clear you wanted to be an educator. I mean, has that always been the case? Have you ever had those moments where it's like, you know what, I'm in the wrong industry, I'm in the wrong profession, or has that always been at the core, since you really got into it, to really make sure that you followed through to make that difference?
Yeah, look, I've always loved education. I love teaching students. I love working with parents and helping parents as they see their children educated. So I've never had a day where I've had a day where I've gone, gee, that was hard, but I've never had a day where I thought I'm in the wrong position.
Right.
I've always loved what I do. And there have been surveys as well, which has shown that teachers have the highest job satisfaction as well out of all professions, because if you think along multiple pathways and lines, then education is suited to you, because there is not one pathway. There are so many things you can do, and touching base with children and touching base with students and touching base with parents is phenomenal.
So, okay, so first of all, hands up, who in the room is a parent? Who's a parent? You have children. Okay, so we've got about 50% of everyone is a parent of one form. So we all are having first-hand experience of not just how the education system is changing, but how the next generation is also empowered and distracted in a whole different way because of technology, right? So just from the point of view of, again, with the backdrop of the school that you're currently in, what do you see in terms of the current, especially if you speak to parents, with the current way that children are being brought up in this new environment? How does education need to evolve, both the school's role, but also the parents' role as well?
Look, education needs to evolve because we're educating kids and students for the future. The issue that we have with education is that we've all been educated, so we are indoctrinated. And we think education is as it was when we were at that age, and it isn't. And we know the futurists are saying that 70% of the jobs in 10 years' time haven't even been created yet. And so with this backdrop of Green School is more about saying, okay, let's think bigger than just jobs. Let's think about leadership and creating a community in the future that are going to look after us in nursing homes, not try and put us there. Let's think about people who are actually going to be finding a compelling desire. And I think that's really important. Let's make children and students and adults in a community aware that we're all learning together, and that our future is going to rely on the decisions we make today. And that if we're not carefully considerate of how we and what we do impacts the future, then our understanding of sustainability is only sustaining us and my needs right now, and that's not sustainability. So this school that you see here has this dynamic understanding of a school without walls, a school where let the local be your guide, a school where children need to get in the mud. Like, we are the only school where we've created a mud wrestling pit. We have a Balinese who instructs children how to wrestle in mud and be part of the earth. Now, if you think about that, that's dynamically different to a school that has fluorescent lights, air conditioning, concrete floors and walls, and desks all lined up in rows. And what we find as a result of our educational offering is that the children become more confident. What we're finding with our understanding is that students want to connect with a bigger purpose. They don't just see learning as being in a room, they see learning as a commitment. And it's challenging at times because you can have wasps and hornets flying past you. It's really challenging if you go to our organic toilets. It's challenging for the parents. The parents come with ideals and then find that they have to modify and adapt and develop a wider understanding. So if I were to say one of the greatest things I wish to see come out of Green School is enlightened, aware, empathetic, community-oriented people who have the nous, who have the social acumen, who have the confidence, who have the attitudes, the positivity, who have the network of a global reach, and have the desire to do something that's going to make our planet better. And I think if every generation does that, we'll be better off as a race.
You're getting into a whole bunch of areas which companies adults spend their entire lifetime trying to figure out, right? Like how do you build culture? How do you build responsibility? How do you build leadership? When you're teaching a skill, and all of us who have been through the schooling system and you've taken exams, there's a specific way that you can teach a number of skills, test does that person actually know those skills or not. Once you go down this route where you're actually really trying to instill a sense of purpose or leadership or responsibility, that's a whole different set of tools you need to have, and it's not necessarily a set of tools that anyone, whether it's the parents, the teachers, administrators, or anyone, were actually trained in to actually bring that in. So could you give a couple of examples of what you're doing, or the kind of experiences that a child could expect being in the Green School or being in that kind of environment, which allows them to be able to start going down this line of getting these things which are so difficult for even us in large companies to be able to work out?
Yeah, and I want to stress that as I talk through the Green School's curriculum and its processes, this is a school that's 7 years old, and this has been defined and developed by a community of committed people. So let me start by, I was impressed because Green School has the ability to give it all, okay? There is an opportunity to educate a whole person. We have what we call 3 frames of learning, and the 3 frames of learning are quite simple. We have one period of learning that is all to do with thematics or integral, where we have an integral frame, where everything is brought together. And that integrated learning means it's a little bit like inquiry-based learning, having big questions, but it's more than that. It's about our big 4 areas that we really want to target. And the big 4 for us is about the cognitive intelligence, if you're going to put it into a dirty word, IQ. We're talking about our physical or active learning, so we're actually trying to get participation and activity in the learning process. We're talking about the social emotional learning, the EQ, which we all know has been on the cover of Times. And we talk about the spirit. I'd like to think of that more as a new form which is called XQ, which is expressive, the expressive quotient. And I think this is where we've got an issue in our modern schoolings that the Green School has cleverly addressed, because it's about us finding an opportunity to express, just not be receptive. Most schools sit there and kids just get bottled up with the information. We know that that's not needed anymore. What we know is the information is going to be here. So how do we impart this next understanding? Well, after these 3 frames of learning, the second frame is proficiency. The proficiency is we know that there are the basic concepts which humanity has passed on and has learnt and has established and refined. That's literacy, and that's numeracy, and usually we also plug in there science and a language. So I'll give you an example. In school, if I asked you this question, how many of you had teachers in your education who allowed you to think? Not teaching you to know or to learn, but actually taught you to think. Could you, if you had, you think about it, was it 5, 6, 8, 10 or what? Okay, so I'm going to ask some numbers here. Put up your hand if you had 10 teachers throughout your history that you're thinking of who taught you to think. Okay. Okay. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you know, that experiment's been done by Professor Mackenzie around the world, and the commonality is 2. And in this room, the commonality was 2. And so that teaches me, or worries me, into thinking, what are we doing if we're not allowing kids to think and develop in us thinking? So here's a little experiment that I like to throw out there. And I do this because you can pull this into proficiency frame. Proficiency does not need to be boring. Learning about literacy can be really, really exciting and engaging simply by getting people to think. Okay? I usually do it by offering some money. Do you mind if I do this?
Oh, how much?
Okay, I've... $50 Australian, just so I'm not talking denominations here. Okay, and all you need to do, anyone in this room, I will give it to you. If you can find anything surrounding this room, you have to look around, that does not have a word. Okay, tell me where it is. Glass of water. Not so easy. What about nothing? It's a word. Now, I throw that out there because immediately you're thinking. And that process of thinking is now tied to vocabulary, to literacy, because we actually think with words. It's this frontal lobe that starts to make things, items, nouns, names. And when you start to tell that to a student, all of a sudden they get the aha. They start to go, that's interesting. And you can expand on this by taking them down pathways where we talk about the alphabet, and you say, when did you learn the alphabet? Like, how old were you when you learned the alphabet, for instance? 4, 5, okay. And we've all been taught the alphabet. We know the alphabet. But how many teachers actually taught you that alphabet came from alpha, beta? That's why it's alphabet. And how many of your teachers actually then took you down the pathway? And this is where you can take a proficiency frame into historical content. You know, alpha actually started as a hieroglyph of an ox head. And it was a really powerful thing. So you can imagine why the pharaohs saw it as a really important element, an aspect of strength, of power, of wealth. And so as the Phoenicians started becoming the merchants and trading, they started to see themselves being able to trade more oxen. And as this turned, the ox head, which took a longer time to draw, became a symbol. And then it flipped as it moved around to Aleph, and then it became Alpha, and then it became the Roman use of Alpha. Now, there's a story where you say it, and all of a sudden, you've got, wow, you've got engagement. Because education starts to bring out storytelling. And that is the greatest form of how we've always learned. So then if we're telling stories, the next thing is that we will get bored if we continually tell the same stories. So we've also got to put into play what we're doing. And that means putting concepts in context. Do you know, when you're in the middle school, the worst thing is you come home and you say, when am I ever going to need that? Or, That just doesn't make sense. So you've got to make sure that the concepts you're teaching actually have a contextual element of active learning, engaged learning. Now, what I'm talking about at the Green School is the experiential frame, which is the third frame of learning. And this isn't, like, we're not all of a sudden revolutionary, progressive, and we've found a new idea. This goes all the way back to Ruskin, who was an art critic way, way back. And he said, you need to bring subjects together. You need to have storytelling. You need to be able to have affective relationships, emotion linked in. You need to have active learning, integrated understandings. And how many of our schools have forgotten that and are now seeing a quality school based on how many kids get a good test result? And how many kids sitting in a test leave the test and go, "Oh!" They just remembered it. Too late. And how many kids get anxious about the exams? And all of a sudden, how many kids see learning as walking into a room and sitting a test, and being smart as sitting a test? So education has to branch us into an area of understanding beyond this basic, rudimentary, test-driven, narrow focus.
So, okay, John, I'm gonna come back to the test thing in a moment, but like starting with those three frames and what you're talking about in terms of experience, and I don't think anyone who has a child, especially one that's anywhere from 8 through to 18, will deny the fact that they will get totally wrapped up in things that they find meaningful and exciting and that are interesting in different ways. I mean, you just go look at the number of YouTube channels on even things like, whether it's Minute Science or whether it's Veritasium or any of those like science-based ones where they've actually made it really interesting, exactly the way you say it. It's like, well, guess what, where this came from, and people share it. So what is the role of the school? And this is a question specifically for something like the Green School. What's the role of a school when we see kids do that, especially if they're getting their experience from computer games, for example, or they're getting that interaction and that meaning from social media? How do you compete, if you do compete at all, or do you embrace that in a certain way? How do you evolve the entire education system to account for the fact that all of these things are competing for the attention of the children? Yeah,
and it draws in a few avenues there. It's a good question too, Roger, because the focus is, first of all, our children are growing up in the great age of distraction, okay? And we're encouraging it too. And I'll preface this with a story. When I was flying out to Bali last year, and I'm in the line, and I think a lot of parents will relate to this, especially parents with very young children. And there was a couple in the line, and this couple were waiting to get their tickets, and the mum turned to the husband, and they had the little 2-year-old under the arm, and they said, "Right, my iPad's charged, I've got the read aloud books, my iPhone's also ready to go, and the laptop's on. We're going to have a good trip." Now, I'm listening as an educator, I'm going, wow, we've got the multimedia nanny all of a sudden. And we're plugging the kid in, and it's at an age far too young. So how do we bring these things together? We have to allow a personalized approach to learning. We've got to have these individual learning pathways, and we've got to be able to do it in a way where we're not just age caging kids. And this is my personal mission as well, is to get parents to appreciate it's not the age cage. It's not how many kids are in the class. It's about allowing opportunities, and the most opportunities you can allow is with the greatest range of diversity, be that age. So we should be allowing our classes to break into tutorials, into smaller groups, into individual learning programs. Our projects should allow for multimedia. Our projects should allow for hands-on. Our projects should be asking the children, what are you really interested in? What are some real interesting questions? And then we can start to diversify down a pathway of individualized learning. And then we can say, hey, listen, there's some fantastic tutorials online. There's some amazing people you can network with right now over the other side of the world. There's a grandma, if you haven't seen Jagata Mitri, who's in Edinburgh. All she's saying to children in India is, oh, that was lovely. Oh, well done. And the encouragement is engaging children in the learning process. we've got the opportunity right now where our children, we can zoom. Whereas I grew up with an atlas and sat there and going, wow, look at that. I can now zoom out of our world. I can go 18 billion light years out of this planet orbit and come zooming back into the Himalayas. I show these in the morning at assemblies. I show these sorts of things, and so children are going, wow, it engages interest. And so we've got to be aware that there are fantastic learning tools, but we can't just say there's one format. We've got to be able to give diversity, and we've got to be aware that you should not plug your children into screen time before the age of 2, because it's proven, research says, there's issues with children who are plugged into screen times at that level. However, there's also research that shows children who are learning through games are actually creating more neural pathways and are becoming more creative through the game-oriented models. And there's some great learning programs that are using games. There was work being done in California years ago, and they would have pathways through games, puzzles, and they would get an expert student. They'd get all the students, and they'd find the expert student, and then they'd teach the other students the pathway through that puzzle. So you're seeing reciprocal teaching methods. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I'm saying the diversity of what we've got needs to be allowing the children to have some ownership of their learning, to give them some personalized learning pathways, to use resources purposefully and intentionally, and to have educators who have the time to be aware of those things and are educated themselves in how to use them. And this is the great challenge that I see for education, is that the digital natives, which was really 1998, was when we had our first real kind of Windows 98 experience. Before that, we had a few boffins, but most people came online around 98. You know, most of our educators, we've got our young educators coming out, but most educators are not au fait with all of the aspects that technology can offer them.
Okay, so there is an element of having to embrace it, as you
Absolutely.
shared. And it's not yet been figured out. I mean, everyone's trying to find their own way of doing it. Let's talk about the other bit, which is kind of the big elephant in the room, exams. Especially because, you know, when you're at primary school and there isn't such a pressure yet to have to perform at a certain level, there's this whole thing called tertiary education at the end of the journey of going through secondary school, where if you aren't at the right level to be able to do that, like, for example, our daughter Teresa wants to be a vet. So as a result, you're just going to have to get certain grades to be able to get in there. Do you think tertiary education itself has to change before we can really shift our whole thinking of exams? Or do you think exams just have to take on a different role to allow people to still get to that tertiary education? I mean, which has to give first to allow the system to work?
Okay, this is an interesting one because I think there's balance in everything. I don't believe in going too far on any end of the spectrum because you're fanatical. And I think there's assessment there's assessment of, and there's assessment for. So some assessments are great, and kids are going to need to know assessments. If assessments are structured around what have you done, what do you need to do? So where are you, and where do you need to get to? And this is through rubrics, and we can do these sorts of assessments through rubrics. So yes, we should have assessments, and we need to know assessment levels because we can start to qualify our own judgment. You know, I've been in schools where I've spoken to teachers and they say, oh, it's a 19 or it's an 18. And I really have concerns about that. I say, well, why? And they say, well, it just is. And you say, well, you've ever explained that to the students? And they're going, well, and I'm going, how does a student know what's expected of them? Because a student, if they know what's expected of them, will get there. So there needs to be an understanding that tertiary education will have a level of meritocracy, and it has these qualifiers. And to get through those levels, we have to have richer assessments, not just at the end point. And we can see programs that are doing this, such as the IB, where there's really good portfolio development and assessment development leading up to an exam. And so we've seen this especially with, if I go down a gender role, and I don't want to be too specific, but in Australia, assessments went down more portfolio-based because girls have greater anxiety in exams than boys. It was alleged. So what if we have a system where tertiary institutions are able to work more closely with schools? And the online curriculum allows for opportunities for you to submit examples, samples, experiments, these video casts, these podcasts. What if a university was mentoring a high school teacher or mentoring a school? So instead of sending prac teachers in, they're actually part of a relationship, and there was a symbiosis going through. And that mutualism means that you've got a richer understanding of learning through the transition period. And then you don't have to have an exam. You've built up relationships, and you're going to guide students to the most important area of being happy in a career. Because how many of us have been driven into careers by parents, and we've got there and all of a sudden we hate it? So the other thing we need to be aware of is, if we're starting to do this, what about schools? It's not just about tertiary coming down. And I have a thing about high schools where we know what educational offerings or the form of lessons will take in university. It's going to be lecture. There'll be massive lecture formats. There'll be online tutorials that you'll need to review, and there'll be tutorials, face-to-face tutorials. So how many secondary schools do we know that actually implement that style of delivery? How many universities can say, oh, they're coming from that high school and they know how to take notes, they've worked in a lecture format, they understand tutorials, they're good, they're independent in their working with online Khan Academy style things? Because I can't see that happening very widely, or it's not widespread. And why isn't it? It's not difficult to do. So if we can get more of a mutualism, more of a transitional breakdown, more of an understanding that we can collaborate, that we've got the digital portfolios now where we can keep our information, where we don't have to rely on just a mark at the end, then we're going to be growing better learners, and we're going to be growing more intelligent systems of communication, and we're going to be growing more better, wider networks. And we all know, everyone in this room, that it's those things that will lead to greater success. If you're a business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a mum, if you're a dad.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up so anyone who has questions here, you could ask some questions as well. And this is really about the future. Because all of these things we've been talking about is about what are the challenges now based on the fact that things are shifting. And of course, whatever we think things are shifting into now, like 5, 10 years in the future, is going to be a whole different shift again. So the X Prize just launched the X Prize Learning Challenge. So this happened this last month. And this is where there's a $15 million challenge for any team, or whoever's the best team, at being able to actually, on an app or on a smartphone, be able to teach the basics of literacy, of mathematics, of the core things that somebody who is somewhere without any teachers as a child is going to be able to master the key things that they need in order for them to be able to have that basic literacy skills, right? And it's going to be a computer that does that. So let's say, I mean, of course, with every X Prize, they end up actually achieving it because the teams are very innovative and they find out new ways. Let's say you have that kind of pathway going. Let's say you have people like Simon Khan, who came along and said, well, is there a better way to teach maths? And now has taught more people maths than any particular maths teacher. Yeah. Or some of the YouTube people that actually are just educating more people than ever. Where's this leading in terms of the future of education itself? If you were to put yourself 10 years in the future, so we're now at, let's call it 2025, what do you think will be happening different from what's happening right now for anyone who has a child going through an education process 10 years from now?
Okay, some of you will want to take notes, because I will give you great ideas right now, okay? You want me to start? Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is augmented reality. So I would say the X Project, if I was putting in my focus on the X Project, I'd be looking at the way of aligning the internet's information with the real world. what would that mean? Well, right now, for us to learn, we go to a textbook, we open it up, and we've got a name that sits over pictures, and we get information from a hard page. We don't actually see it in reality, okay? Right now, we're getting to a level of complexity in our internet and our communication bridge, so we have what we call augmented reality. So what if you could develop programs where students put on their glasses or their watches or they beam it on somewhere, and they can actually, instead of looking here, they're starting to say glass. And then if they want to see it in Russian, if they want to see it in Indonesian, this is going to come up. What if they want to see how this glass was forged? So it takes you to a video that's already out there and available, and it will show how it's forged. What if you want to link with a person who's creating this glass product, and you immediately want them, and you've got a better idea of this handle. This handle looks as if it's got a defect because it's too long, it could snap. So automatically, augmented reality is going to bring a global understanding together, and we're going to break down walls in doing this. This is going to happen. It's going to happen. There will be resistance from parents. We'll probably have people who are sitting on farms unplugging all the internet connections because they don't want it, but it's going to happen, and we're mad not to embrace it. What if we looked at our learning institutions and we said right now, hey, schools, you know, we've got schools that are 38 weeks in length and then they're not being used. What if you had real, important, exciting holiday vacations, learning vacations? And so all of a sudden you went not just to rest on the beach, but you went and you actually went for a learning vacation. And you, all of a sudden, instead of having Star Alliance, you were part of Star Learning. And you paid your dues, a little bit like a timeshare, and anywhere during that year, you could plug into a school for a holiday period with excellent teachers, and you knew then that your child could be learning with a wealth of depth. And it might be that you could extend this to where Greece was now ancient history, where Australia was marine biology, where Bali was artistic culture and Hinduism. And so you could actually start to have learning become part of your vacation, and you as an adult would also be learning with your children.
Maybe someone would set up a resort where you can go and have a holiday and learn about entrepreneurship, for example.
There's always a forerunner. but this is going to happen. What if schools started to realize that schools have the box, and everybody's known what the box is? It's the classroom. Everyone's heard that we've got to get the kids out of the box. That's not the box. That's a box within a box. The box of schools is the school, the perimeter of the school fence. And kids think, oh, it sucks, I've got to go to school today. What if school was no longer a perimeter? What if school was actually, you're going to use, say in Bali, a temple that's not being used, and you're going to be teaching some meditational aspect. And all of a sudden, it's not the school curriculum, but you're saying, kids, if you attend there, your attendance will be taken, we'll recognize that, and well done. So all of a sudden, kids are not seeing school as having to be in a building or having to be seen in a precinct. What if Australian schools, and I've taught in Australian schools, instead of being in a resource war where they're trying to get the better things, the bigger things, and spend more money on their own little playground areas, or their science blocks or their performing arts centre, why don't they share these with the world? Why don't they share these with the community more? And open themselves up. What if school actually stopped having to be fees to go and get teachers, but had another way of source funding? What if schools actually knew that what we want as adults is to have some time with our kids and not just on a weekend when we're rushed? What if we were able to work in a hot-seated arrangement where if you looked at what business and schools need, there are commonalities and they don't need them all the time, such as really good IT infrastructure, such as lecture theatres, such as web conferencing suites, such as really good food outlets and nutrition, such as nice places to relax, a gymnasium, a swimming pool. Can you hear me? All of these things businesses need and schools need. What if the business that the parents were going to was hot seating networks, because we all know that's how we're doing it these days, and it was on a floor above. And what if someone like Google owned the floor above that, and they actually had a social enterprise where they wanted their employees to have children going to their school, and then there was a common thread of community? What if the children who come on bio buses to these locations with their parents, the buses are then just logistically organised, so if you're going to study the volcano, your class will be on the bus, looking on learning pads, going to the volcano, getting out, knowing the concepts, and then exploring. And then coming back at lunchtime, and the parents are coming out of their office spaces, and they're coming and they're sharing meals with their children who are coming back and telling them what excitement they had. What if schools didn't have to have classrooms? What if schools just had learning centres, learning pods? And so the building was the only resource you had to really expend on, and you had areas that didn't damage the environment. They were those pods such as canvas tent areas with organic toilets, which could be right beside a sensitive mangrove area. And so the children could actually be going down there and learning in the precinct. These are all opportunities, and they're so easy to do. They actually cost less, they integrate better learning, and they build community. So in the future, we're going to see schools and schooling vary greatly if we've got enough diversity, if we've got enough schools like Green School that are trying to say, what if? Not, we have to do this. So there's some ideas.
Well, can we give him a round of applause for those ideas? So there's a huge difference of looking at education as a layer over life as opposed to a phase of life, right? Which is largely a part of this is how we as adults, whether we're parents, whether we're teachers, whether we're administrators, whether we're anywhere within that piece, are ourselves having to also be the student. We have to continually expand and grow where we are as well. We're going to open this up for questions. So any questions that you might have, we have one right at the back there. We're just going to take a number of questions and see where they go. So when you do ask a question, just introduce yourself and fire away.
Okay, I'm Jeanette Palin from Stockholm, and I'm very engaged in all the questions you just raised. And first I want to say I love absolutely everything that you're talking about and what you're saying. My question is, which parts of this could we use already in schools today? The background of the question is that I've been visiting a school quite recently, fourth graders, that have a very engaged teacher, and she takes them out to visit different places. She asked me and colleagues or other engineers to come there and talk about being an engineer and that sort of thing. So she would, and teachers like her, would really adapt that and trying to bring that into her classroom or bring them to wherever she needs. So which parts could we already today bring into schools for these teachers to use?
And that's a school in Sweden right now.
Yes,
right?
yes, in Stockholm.
And what you're seeing there is an example of really good learning, really good teaching, but in a microcosm. And why? Because it's in her class. Okay? What if you get rid of this idea of a classroom? So one of the concepts I'd throw out there right now is something that I'm wanting to experiment with and explore, is called Brain Barn. Okay, what if you had an open plan of learning? And instead of the old system where you had to pay the salary of a teacher and then you had to put them in a classroom and then you had to fill it with as many children as you could until parents complained, okay, which is what happens. What if you said, hey, let's see how many kids have got this multiverse understanding of things they want to learn. Let's put them in a big open space, okay, that has, say, a little lecture theatre, that has mezzanine, that has individual breakouts, that have these sorts of arrangements here in front of us. And then what we do is we use technology and we say, book a teacher. So like the library system, but you magnify that, you have your staff, 9 teachers sitting in there, and then kids can book them. And there's a quota. And then what about if you empower the teachers and you said to the teachers, hey, okay then, I need you to teach 5 lectures this month of 40 kids. And so, okay, I want to do that on week 2, I'll do that on week 4. I might want to do 5 lectures in 1 week because it's all really good material. And then you've got them to say, and now I want you to take a class of 20, and all of a sudden they've got a quota system. So what if then there's a booking system which our technology can do right now, we've got the spaces available right now, and then we have our concepts of what the kids are learning, and what if a child who's a really fast, accelerated learner gets to the level where they've learnt all those things? Then let's utilize them. Let's put them into the booking system, and then they can come in and start helping and being booked by their peers. So what I'd be saying is I'm expanding that concept of the micro, and I'm saying what we're seeing is an excellent example of a teacher in a little cell. We need to get that teacher out. We need to get the parents who are coming in to support into a bigger arena. And we need to break down those structures.
Yes.
In a situation where there is a teacher who's out there in Stockholm who would like to connect in with just at least where things are at the Green School, is there any way that educators can get connected today to the activities they can do?
Yeah, we do a Green Educators course, and we also have some online opportunities to connect too. But I think, you've got to be aware of the time zone differences when we're starting to talk these things through. But you can do your podcasts, and you can do podcasts and share them.
Yeah, I was looking for ideas for these teachers to actually use within the classroom, because I'm thinking of this obviously as a long process. And
Well, I would say,
this would be the
we're going to
first
go to
step.
another question, but I would say
Okay.
certainly, like for them to get involved in something like the Green Educator course or something like that, which is going through, here's things you can do in the classroom, here's what we do, those kind of, that will give inspiration.
And I'd complete by just saying, if you've got these engineers coming in, then start asking the students what are they interested in, and start getting not just engineers but more parents and more community members, and start to do a mentorship program. And that just opens up the teaching field so much more widely.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you. Sandra, we'll come over to Sandra's over here.
Hi, my name is Sandras. I'm the chapter director for Startup Grind Lusaka, Zambia. I come from a family of educators. My father was an educator, and we're 10 in our family, and 6 of us are in education of one sort or another. And my question to you, John, first of all, I must say, very inspiring. And my question is, how do you deal with the regulation? Like, you're asking what if, and then you are blazing a new trail and setting the new standard on how education should be conducted. How do you deal with regulation, where you say you must do this in order to qualify to be a school and to be recognized?
Okay, well, I'll talk about the school I was at before Green School. I ignored it. Because we had a historical context. What I'd be saying is, compliance, there's nothing wrong with standards if you're going to see them as minimal, okay? Standards need to allow you to be able to go above. Mostly standards are used to pull down from the top so we raise from the bottom, okay? That's me generalizing, and a bit of frustration in there too. So what I would say firstly is, if you know what the standards are, nothing I've spoken about tonight will not allow you to meet compliance. Risk assessments, sure, you need to do those if you're going out. National curricula, sure, you need to have them embedded into your scope and sequence. But you know what? If you look at national curricula from around the world, in maths, in numeracy, in literacy, in English, it isn't very different. It's just a different way of teaching it, and when you come to teach it. So I don't believe you need to be too fearful of breaking compliance. You know, I think the reason we're caught in cages, it just hasn't been opened up enough for investigation. You know, why do we have kids in 12-month blocks? And why do we have enrollment policies where if they're one day younger or one day older, they're in a different age? You know, that's nuts. So, you know, schools have got an ability to be able to accelerate or to be able to group, multi-age, so you can come around those things as the years progress. Why do we have schools where kids are in little boxes? It's mostly to do with management, classroom discipline. I feel safe, okay? So I would say, how do you get little areas outside to be safe? And you can define the perimeters. You know, we're building learning pods at Green School. And when I say we, I don't mean teachers, I mean students. So they're building their own learning pods, little breakout areas. And they're learning the art of building, and they're going to have an area that they're going to be proud of. So can you imagine a student who's built their class saying to the teacher, you know, yes, I want to stay in your classroom? They're going to say, can we go down to the one I built? So there's a way of using student voice, which needs to be much more dynamic within schools, to start drawing out. What about governments? Well, you know how many people have come to see Green School because they like what we're doing, because they appreciate the focus is on sustainability. So I think be a leader in a field. Anyone worth their salt can write up documents to meet compliance. And we shouldn't be fearful of paper. We should be seeing it as a way of getting us to what we want to do. I don't, so, yeah.
And just a distinction on compliance as well. You're always going to have the national compliance of a country. So Indonesia does, where you have to have a certain structure, which is a non-profit for a school to exist. You have to have a certain percentage of Indonesian teachers who are going to be in it. So there's that kind of compliance. Then there's the other compliance, which is compliance to a curriculum. Yeah. And that was one of the biggest decisions when I was on the board, which was, do we do the Cambridge curriculum? Do we do the IB curriculum? Do we go out and actually just create like our own curriculum? And that was the decision that got made. And at the moment, John, with all the teachers, with everyone at the school, has on the one hand that opportunity, which is one of very few schools that actually is carving its own way with its own qualifications that are Green School, but also the challenges. I mean, like opportunity challenges both ways, because you're really trying to create a curriculum at the same time as executing it, which is a tough call for anybody, right?
Yeah.
But as a result of that, you've got this much bigger freedom than if you were being compliant towards something like an IB system that you're trying to follow. Let's take another question. Yeah, go ahead, Gideon.
Hi, my name is Gideon Shalwick. My question is, what do you think needs to happen for the world to embrace this way of learning? The world.
Okay, I think the world already can embrace it, because for the first time in the history of education, no longer is knowledge and learning framed around your wealth or your location. You know, think about it. This is unique in the history of our global society, that we have the technology where anybody at any time can connect with anybody at any time. So I think it's going to be driven by the user, as most things are. It's not driven by the people who create the ideas. It's driven by the people who use them. And so the platforms, I can tell you right now, will be magnified in the growth of students wanting to learn in a way where it's contextualized, where it's authentic, where it's linked, where it is real. You know, learning something real is so much more powerful than learning something that means you're going to pass a test or a question in a test. I think the other thing we have to understand is that our generation is starting to embrace these things. And so as a result of that, we're starting to engage our students and our children in the world of technology, and we just need to make sure it's measured and balanced and governed so that it's effective in what we're trying to ultimately arrive at, which is, if I had to say, well-adjusted, academically astute, socially and morally significant, happy people. And I think that that's the ultimate goal. And if we all say that's the ultimate goal, we need to look at what the railway tracks are that are leading to it. And I think we'll find the carriages will be populated by the people. The ones that aren't, they'll be taken off the tracks.
Final question. Question from the back there.
So we know that Khan Academy is now the biggest school in the world, and there is now the school in the cloud, and they're kind of leading the way and taking education into a different form. My question would be, the Green School has something which is unique. How long before Bonnie Grace can go to Green School from a bedroom at McMaster's Beach?
Well, we actually have, this is the other thing, like the model of Green School, it has an outdoor education program. So there are camps, what we call green camps. So Bonnie Grace could come straight over and have a week's stay in Green School, learning the sustainability without having to be enrolled for a longer period of time. The focus we have to appreciate is that schools need to have greater networks and connectives. And this is my whole wish, to see schools breaking free of this thing where I'm good, and it's a little bit like my brothers and I, my sisters, when we ate as a family. I was one of 8. There were 4 boys, 4 girls, 10 years between us. And when Mum came out to give us our meals, most of us ate like this. And I think education needs to start to say, does anyone want what I've got? And if we can start to share the food and share the nourishment, then Bonnie Grace will be getting elements of Green School at the Central Coast, and we will be getting elements of Bonnie Grace's knowledge and experience with us, and the diversity of connectedness will mean that the world will become a smaller place. You know, my big mission is breaking down walls. Imagine in a world such as this where no longer was it territory boundaries or national pride. It was about learning and just wanting to learn together.
So John, for anyone here who, I mean, you've answered the question, if there's an educator who's interested, then there's a way to get involved. If you have a child and would like them to experience it, you can do that through the camps. The final 2 things is if someone is here in Bali and they wanted to visit, what's the process for them to be able to do that? And in terms of the scholarship program, what does that work? If anyone wants to contribute, how does that help children here in Bali?
Yeah, and this is a specific to Green School. I've tried to give you an overarching understanding of education from my philosophy and from the philosophy I've garnered from my experience at Green School and from all the schools I've been in. But Green School has tours where people come and they view the school. And it is about seeing the school as this special entity. It can be frustrating for some people because they see us as a bit of a zoo, but we're not. But you can book in and register and come and have an understanding of what we do through that process. Why do we do this? And I want to make this really clear, because the reason we do offer tours, the reason why we do these things is because we have a firm commitment to our local scholars program. Every cent that we get from our tours and from our fundraising, we had a big fundraising drive yesterday, goes towards our local scholars, our local Indonesian children. And we are educating local Indonesians in this format because we want to glean from them their heritage and their cultural understanding, because we can grow as a school through that. And we want to give back to this country what we are taking from them. We want to be a truly a school that is for the people. So we offer scholarships, and if anybody wants to support our scholarships, be it as little as $5, okay? Every cent will go towards a student attending our school who is a local Indonesian scholar.
Awesome. One of the best quotes I heard from one of my mentors, Buckminster Fuller, and I heard this through a story that someone had a dinner with him, and he was talking about their children because they were sitting around being all like just surprising to everyone by their intellect or by their thinking. And Buckminster Fuller said, our children are our elders in universe time. It's like they're our elders because they were born. It's like iPhone 6 might have come after iPhone 3, but it's actually the advanced model, right? It's like, you know, our children are born into a universe which is far advanced from the one that we were born into. So as a result, they already are coming as the advanced model. And that's where education has this paradox, because on the one hand, this advanced model has shown up. On the other hand, we're meant to be educating this advanced model in some way. So there is that challenge within that. The reason that I invited you to be here was 2 aspects. One is, you know, myself, my family, we dedicated 3 years of our lives to experience the Green School, met many amazing people there. We're not there anymore, but at the same time, it's like a huge part of our lives, and will always be a big part of our lives just going forward. So it's always got a special place in my heart. But the other aspect of it, outside of the school itself, is the fact that you're never going to find something going on like this that does not attract amazing people. And that's from the founders, John and Cynthia Hardy, through to many of the teachers that have shown up, many of the parents, and yourself, John, that like at the end of the day, the real hope isn't even about the school, right? It's about the actual individuals and the educators that are willing to kind of see it through thick and thin, when things get tough, when you're really just focusing at where you're going, and then realizing, which is difficult sometimes, that you're just being an inspiration in that pathway just by focusing and doing that. So I know you've been an inspiration to everyone here tonight. I've really enjoyed just listening to your journey. I'm going to be enjoying even more watching that journey as it goes forward as well. So I want to say a huge thank you. And can we please give John Stewart a big round of applause? Now, thank you, John. Now, before John goes, we have, just by synchronicity, somebody who has actually come all the way from Los Angeles, who runs what is one of the world's preeminent, in fact, it is the #1 social media-driven awards program in the world, and that goes for education, goes for environment, and we have Liz Kelly here, who has an announcement to make. So could you please give Liz Kelly a big round of applause? Liz, take the microphone. Yeah, we'll stand up as well.
Thank you, Roger. Well, we are really excited to be here tonight, and we, just by osmosis, had dinner with John, and he didn't realize that he was about to get an Oscar for social good. This is our top award. It's called a Golden Goodie Award, and we wanted to honor you tonight, and Roger said you have 2 minutes, and I don't really think I need to give a big speech because I think we learned so much about you tonight. But I will share with you that the previous winners have been the director of the Cove, Louis Sohoyas, Anna Cummings, who runs Five Gyres, which studies their 5 plastic islands and what that's doing to the environment. And I heard about you 2 years ago, so I've really been thinking about this since I met Roger. And it's such an honor, so thank you for encouraging youth to think. I think that was my biggest takeaway tonight. And congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. A photo opportunity. You got a camera? Oh, right over there. Okay, you got a photo? We're good. We missed your moment. Another one?